All right, we are going to do Monroe to Adams, and not John Adams, but John Quincy Adams, which was his son, if you recall that. Now, remember our theme so far, and I'm going to try and do this a little bit more often. Our objective for the unit, with all the presidents that we've done so far, except for Washington, is what are the impacts their decisions have had on our country. Okay? So that's our big focus, and any notes you should take should deal with the objective. What was the impact their decisions made on our country? But we also have a team theme, which is finding balance. And with Monroe, his finding balance was not just finding balance within our country like Washington was. You know, how do I balance building this new country versus the outside influences? Adams tried to find balance too, right? How do I balance out what the French wanted, and should I go to war, should I not go to war? Jefferson was stuck between the Constitution. How do I do this? How do I do it the right way? So every president we have tries to find balance between doing what everybody wants and making everybody happy with what is necessary and has to get done. And I even find that in my own life, and you will too. Finding that balance is tough. But Monroe and Adams had a tougher challenge than we give them credit for. So, War of 1812 is done. And just when we thought we were done dealing with the Great Britain, we got to deal with Great Britain. Now, the good thing is, we didn't have to deal with impressment. We didn't have to deal with, invasion. We didn't have to deal with ships taking our cargo. That's all done. It's all over with. There's no trouble on the high seas except for pirates. But there's always issues with pirates, even today. I mean, you can't sail around that's why we have such a big Navy, is to protect a lot of our cargo ships. But in 1817, we finished up with the issues that we had when we had the War of 1812. So 1817, and I know a lot of you are taking this in your Monroe notes, but really it's a treaty, so where should it go? In the treaty section, there should be probably a couple sections and pages earlier in your notebook. I can't tell you exactly what page that is because we're all on different pages in there. So I'll let you flip and find. I don't know. All right. I'm going to continue with the Rush-Bagot Treaty, or Bagot. No, that's spelled, Bagot's a little bit different. But basically what we did was that we negotiated with the removal of Britain's military from the Great Lakes and the Canadian border. So in 1817, John Quincy Adams was negotiating with Great Britain, and we limited the number of naval vessels. That's on both sides. So what we're doing is we're demilitarizing the border between the United States and British-owned Canada. You with me? So Fort Mackinac, Fort Detroit, those things around the border are now void of Great Britain, and there's very little military presence even in those. And if you ever go to Fort Michilimackinac and you go to the island and you do Fort Mackinac on the island, you'll even get there, they'll be like, well, during the War of 1812, all they had was political prisoners here, and we kept them away, British military prisoners. And it wasn't really involved in the war that much, yada, yada, yada. And then after the war, there was like a captain and his family that lived there until like 1840 or 1850, something like that, just before the Civil War. There was pretty much nobody there. And then during the Civil War, they used it as like a prison for some Southern Confederate officers again. So it had some significance during the War of 1812, but afterwards, because of the Rush-Bagot Treaty, even here in Michigan, we have some of that history because, well, we are Michigan, and we are pretty much all the Great Lakes, aren't we? So it's kind of cool. So this Rush-Bagot Treaty really impacted our state along with the rest of the country because we didn't have that foreign influence of military presence right on our border. A year later, we got the whole Great Lakes thing done, but we didn't know where the western or the northern border in the west was. It was really vague because you see the dotted line on the picture? That was Louisiana Purchase. And we're like, yeah, we kind of owned some, but we weren't real clear because, well, it wasn't like they went out and, when you buy a house or something and they go and they survey the land and like, oh, this is where your property is, this is where, and they put the stakes in the ground. Nobody went there. The only Americans that went there after the Louisiana Purchase was Lewis and Clark, and, well, they only went down a river. They didn't go and survey, well, this is where the boundary is. They were like, well, this is kind of what it looks like, and we'll kind of sort of draw a line on the map, but we don't know if that actually matches what's in the real world. So it's kind of an imaginary line, and like, well, let's get some surveys out there and actually draw a real line and put some stakes in the ground. Now, they didn't have paint cans, and they didn't go around doing that, but they did survey markers. And they'd established a 49th parallel as our northern border, and that's that line that we currently have today. And it said that anybody could go to the Oregon Territory. Wow, what a great treaty. Well, is it a treaty? It's kind of a treaty, but they didn't call it a treaty. They just called it a convention of, hey, let's draw a line and let's figure this out. Where do we want to do it? So it's kind of like a treaty, but not really a treaty. It's a negotiation, signed paper. Well, that's kind of what a treaty is, too. Questions? Did we do good? Yeah. Good. We're only one slide down, 50 more to go. Just kidding. It's only like 48. Yeah. Okay. Great Britain is out of the picture. We've negotiated boundaries, no more military presence. We're now like good friends again with a big fence. Okay, it's an imaginary fence along the 49th parallel, but we're good. We're trading with Great Britain. We've stolen their ideas of how to make textile mills. Okay, they might be a little bit upset about that. But hey, we didn't take it. Well, somebody from Great Britain took it and brought it to us and then sold it to us. So really, they have to be upset with the citizen, the English citizen who brought it to us. I mean, hey, we'll take what we can get, right? I mean, but then we let them stay here instead of sending them back to be executed in Great Britain. I don't know. We still have that problem nowadays, don't we? All right. So, Latin America. You were supposed to learn about this when you did Latin America, but I find out every year that you guys have absolutely no clue about the revolutions in Spanish America. I know. Every year I'm like, hey, remember those cool revolutions in like Mexico where they had like 30 dictators in like 30 years? And everybody's like, no. And I'm like, oh, that's so fun history. Because Spain had control of almost all of Latin America except for Brazil, right? That was all Portugal, and then there was a little couple countries here and there. Maybe you learned about it. Maybe you didn't. But Spain, everybody was like, wow, look what America did. Okay, I can't say America because they're all America. We're all America, right? From Canada to tip of Argentina, it's all America. But they were like, look what the United States did. Look, they got independence, and they're like, well, what if we did that to Spain? What if we kicked Spain out of here and we did this by ourselves? And Simon Bolivar and Hidalgo and St. Martin, you guys have no idea who those people are. They're like, how would I put it? They were like John Adams, John Hancock, Sam Adams. George Washington, I guess Simon Bolivar would be more of a George Washington type of guy. And they led revolutions in their countries, but they didn't have countries. They were just all controlled by Spain. So in their regions, they went through and tried to kick Spain out. But the one thing that they didn't do, that we did do, that just about every revolution, even the French Revolution, was what was the one thing we did that no other revolution did?
We had a government ready.
We had a plan of government ready to go if and when we win. They were like, hey, let's just kick them out. And then everybody was like, yes, let's do this. And they kicked out Spain. And then they went, yes, we're independent. And there's like, all right, who's in charge? And some guy went, I'm in charge. And then we're like, no, you're not. Bang, you're dead. I'm in charge. Kind of like what's happening in Venezuela right now, where you got two people going, I'm in charge. And both of them are going, no, you're not. And then we have to pick sides as America or the United States. And so we've chosen a side, and some people don't like that side that we chose. And then we get into other countries. Oh, that's a whole nother story of getting into other countries and choosing their leaders for them. But so everybody's kicking Spain out. I mean, what'd they do? Jackson, in April of 1818, gosh, what? I always put this. What's up with the month of April? Why does everything happen in April? I know, it's like winter's just ending, you know.
Perfect to fight.
It can be. But it's just, throughout history, you're going to be, I've pointed it out to you, so now every time something happens in April, you're like, yeah, Mr. Prince is right. It only took me like a couple years of teaching history to go, wow, everything like major happens in April. Like end of stuff, beginning of stuff, it's all April, except for World War II, that was like November-ish. Old hickory. Because if you know something about hickory, baseball bats are made of hickory. And if you try and break, and you take a piece of hickory wood and you just try and break it or hack it down, it doesn't go. It's mean, it's tough, and it doesn't break.
And that movie we watched, he focused that like easily.
Well, many of those are ash. Many of those are ash bats, and in movies they use maple because it breaks easy and you get a good effect for it. So hickory bats are also really heavy. So a lot of batters use a maple or an ash bat that's lighter. But we don't need to go into baseball right now. But hickory, really tough, really hard, rough wood. And he got his name because he acts like hickory. He's just old, mean, tough. He was sent down because there was a lot of riots and upheaval in Louisiana area, Mississippi, Florida, right? All that southern part below Georgia up to the Mississippi River, all that area was still Spanish owned. Remember Ponce de Leon? Yeah. You've heard that? Okay, it's all in all the Disney and Pixar movies, right? And Pirates of the Caribbean. Ponce de Leon and searching for the Fountain of... You got it, right? And it was supposed to be in Florida, so that's why Spain wanted to keep it. You know, you'd still think it's there because where do all the old people go? Florida! That is not a fountain of youth. That's just a fountain of old people now. Right? It is. If you ever go down there, do not go to dinner early. Because if you go to dinner early, like 5, 6 o'clock, you can't get a seat. I mean, all the old people are there, but they're done eating like at 5:30, so you can go there anytime, like 7 o'clock. You're like, wow, nobody's here. They're like, yeah, the dinner rush hour is already through. You're like, dinner rush? Dinner rush should be right now, right? Yeah, up here in Michigan, you go to dinner at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. You're like, yeah, tables, yeah, you got about an hour wait. You go down to Florida, and you're like, hey, let's grab something quick to eat before dinner. And you're like, yeah, that'll be 2-hour wait. You're like, it's 4 o'clock. It's craziness. I know, they got to get to bed and watch Wheel of Fortune at 7 o'clock. The Fountain of Youth is there. Go to bed early, right? No, I don't know. All right, sorry, this is silly and off topic. So Andrew Jackson was sent down, Old Hickory, hero of New Orleans, sent down to take care of the Spanish forts and capture them. So he did more than just capture the forts. He expanded, he raided, he decimated Seminole territories. Whoa, 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 Mr. Prince. I thought you said he was supposed to go down to Spanish forts. Well, he got a little carried away. And he was like, well, if we just take care of the Spain, they could do what Great Britain did. And that would be rile up the natives. So why don't we kill two birds with one stone? Okay, two civilizations with one stone. Or one bullet. Or two bullets, maybe. Is he literally went in and literally expanded, raided Seminole territory. Seminoles were the Native Americans there. And yes, that's why Florida, University of Florida, Florida State, their Seminoles as their mascot. It was against orders. The orders were just Spanish forts. He expanded it, used that elastic clause to expand and do whatever he wanted. Quincy Adams and James Monroe. Remember, Monroe's the president. Adams is the Secretary of State right now. That's another weird thing. Why is it always the Secretary of State who becomes president later? It's like, just seems to be this like, hey, if you want to be president, become Secretary of State and then run for president. I mean, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Clinton, I mean, yeah. I mean, oh, I'm sure there's a ton in history. I'm not just, I'm drawing blanks on names right now. But if you look like their previous job, like, I'm just guessing, like half of our presidents were like Secretary of States before. You do learn a lot of stuff. It's like being like an assistant principal and then becoming a principal. Spain was absolutely furious. Well, wouldn't you be? This guy came in, took your forts, and riled up and destroyed all the Native Americans in your territory, and then took over the land and said, "Hey, it's ours." That seems kind of like invasive. Oh, wait, it was. Yeah, Enzo.
What year was the treaty negotiated or made?
The Adams-Onis Treaty was 1819, I believe. 1819, 1820, somewhere in there. I'll have to look that up and put that in there. Thank you. So Spain wanted him to be arrested and brought to Spain and tried. Expedited. You guys know what expedited means? Take somebody from one country to try them in another country. We expedite criminals all the time. El Chapo was expedited. You know El Chapo, the big drug dealer guy from Mexico. Mexico arrested him, and then we're like, we want to try him. They're like, okay, here you go. He's out in Colorado right now. The first time, but he's in God, I keep saying Oregon. He's in Colorado now in like a maximum security prison in the mountains, like, and the prison's like in granite, so you can't dig through granite. And there's like only one way out. It's kind of like the Alcatraz of the mountains. There's only like one way out, and we control that way out, and there's like no way to get out. You can dig all you want, but all you can dig is into a mountain that's granite. So good luck with that. So Adams-Onis, they were like, okay, we want to try him, we want to take him to court, but the United States says no, and they're like, well, we can do this one of two ways. We can make a treaty, or we can go to war. So Spain was like, well, we saw what you did with Great Britain. I don't think we want a piece of that right now. And you know what? We didn't find the fountain of youth, so you can have the swampland and the alligators and the snakes and the mosquitoes. It's all yours. And by the way, those Seminoles, they're not very nice. Good luck. They're like, sure, you can have the swamps and the alligators and the snakes and everything else that's there. Good luck. So we get the southern border is agreed upon. We get Louisiana, Mississippi, and Florida. Spain loses, we lose this part of Texas. Okay, so we had some of it with the Louisiana Purchase. They're like, hey, can we define that a little bit closer and we'll get Texas? And we'll be like, yeah, sure, we'll give you Texas, we get Florida, and we'll just secretly put a whole bunch of Americans over there later and then let them choose to be independent and then totally back them and take the land back later. But that's another story for another time. Well, because that's a Mexican-American War, and that doesn't happen for another 20 more years, 25 more years. So we gotta plant the seed of make them feel comfortable that this is the border, and then go in and raid later. I've got to look at, but I think 1819, 1820, somewhere in there. Nobody's got their computers on? Okay. Hey, I can do this. Oops. Oh, come on, open up. All right, I'll get it. Any question? And Spain had to pay us $5 million. Hey, that paid for the almost Louisiana Purchase. Oh, I can't do that. Okay. So, Mexico's gained independence from 1821. The Americans continued to settle in the Mexican land. I told you we were going to just be all sneaky with it.
So is this the 20-year?
No. We're just setting the stage. And so we were like, hey, people want to still stay in Mexico. Is it cool? They're like, yes. Spain was like, yes, you can come, but you have to become Spanish. And then later on, when Mexico earns its independence, they're like, you can come, but you have to abide by our rules. Here's our rules. And we're like, okay, we'll abide by your rules until we don't like them, and then we'll revolt and become our own country. I mean, that's what you do, right? You walk into China and be like, well, those rules don't fit me because I'm used to America. I'm going to go by my rules, and then I get arrested for taking stuff. That's a reference to some UCLA players.
Oh, yeah.
I'm almost there. When was the Adams-Onis Treaty? Let's see how well Google works. Okay. You asked when the Adams-Onis Treaty was. Can't reach Google. Adams-Onis Treaty.
Here's what I found. The first result is from Wikipedia.
1819. There you go. I was right. 1819. Thank you, Google Assistant. I'll add that later for the next class. Okay, so 1822, Spain gets a whole bunch of allies in Europe to put down the revolutions. So all these Spanish revolutions that are happening, or Latin American revolutions are happening, they're all over the place. They're like wildfires in California. And you know what I mean by wildfires in California. They're like everywhere.
Big and bad.
Big and bad, right? And there's all these revolutions being led by that guy at Bolivar. Well, I wonder if he could get a country named after himself. Oh, maybe he does. And Simon, or in Hidalgo, there's a great movie about him. And he leads the revolution in Mexico. He was a priest. He was kind of like, I don't know, Washington and Martin Luther King together. Yeah, he's a bad dude. Earned a Mexican independence from Spain. There's some others, but anyway. So they're like, hey, Spain's like, dude, guys, I need some help. And so France and Austria and Russia and Prussia were like, yeah, we'll help you get some out of that as long as we get a little bit for ourselves. And they were like, yeah, sure, let's colonize Latin America because we didn't colonize Africa because we missed out on that.
What is Prussia?
Prussia, it's kind of like Western Russia, Soviet Union, like Poland-ish area. Turkey, not Turkey, Latvia. You with me? Okay. Don't get it confused with Persia, though. Persia is Iran, Iraq, before it was Iran and Iraq. The Middle East. Okay, don't confuse Persia with Prussia. Got it? Okay. So all of a sudden we're going to have all of these European countries that have no take in Africa. Eighth graders, you know what I'm talking about when we talk about the scramble for Africa. This is the new scramble for Latin America. Okay, so this is the new scramble, and everybody wants to come in and get their piece and set up their new colonies because Spain's losing control. So when Spain's starting to lose control, they're like, oh, this is a good opportunity to help Spain out and claim stuff for ourselves. Seventh graders, this is like, hey, there's a whole bunch of supplies over on the table. Help yourselves because I can't have it all anymore. And everybody goes, okay, and they all rush in. You with me? All right, so Monroe's like, whoa, we don't need all this in our hemisphere. So Monroe was like, we don't want all these colonial powers in Latin America. Why? Why wouldn't we want all these colonial powers next door? Dan, thanks for raising your hand. We could take America. We could take, be careful what you say with America, because it's all America. The United States of America. Well, maybe we could learn a history lesson from Great Britain and not repeat those, and now we know how to defeat the United States of America. So we could set up colonies and just start encroaching, couldn't we? Ooh, wouldn't that be special? So we were like, but wait a minute. But Monroe was like, yeah, but they got a lot of resources. Maybe we, as the United States of America, could impact or influence these new budding countries and get resources for ourselves. So let's try and keep Europe out of it and set ourselves as the dominant country and negotiate and work with those countries to benefit us as a hemisphere. Smart man. So what he does is he's like, all right, we want to protect our affairs with Latin America or with America itself. So you know what we're going to do? He's going to put up the Monroe Doctrine. And he says, you know what? If you come, we will treat you just like Great Britain. If you try and step on democracy in Latin America, we will meet you with force. You will not colonize these countries that are earning their independence right now. You will not come in and step on their toes. You will not interfere in America's affairs. And when I say America, I mean north to south.
He means Alaska.
Where did he get that idea from? Good old GW's farewell address. Avoid alliances and power struggles. They were going to try and come in and have a power struggle with Latin America, which could have led to a power struggle with us, right? Yeah. You know what? We're not going to have it here in this. So basically, he kicked them out. And, well, that set up other issues later on. But even to this day, there's no European influence in Latin America or North America. It did work pretty well, and it still works today. So that Monroe Doctrine is still in effect today. So, Monroe's got his 2 terms done. Guess who's going to run for president? You got it. John Quincy Adams. Be careful. The other John Adams is dead. That would be really awkward if we elected a dead guy as a president. We only put them on dollar bills. All right. So, here's the best thing about the election of 1824. So, 5 guys are running. Well, 4 plus a few others. The Federalist Party isn't there anymore. Remember? War of 1812 pretty much destroyed the Federalist Party. They're like non-existent. So you got 4 people in the Democratic Republican Party, right? Remember, there's not Democrats or Republicans yet, right? We have just the Democrat Republicans versus the Federalists. Oh, wait, they're not there. All right, you with me? 4 people, 1 political party, and they all like get almost all equal votes, except for Andrew Jackson gets the most. But what do we know about our elections? Well, they're not fake. They're not rigged. But who votes? Congress votes. And you have to have a majority electoral college votes, right? Right now it's 270 to win. Back then it was a little less because there's less states, less congressmen. But at that point in time, you couldn't get majority. He couldn't get half plus one because all the votes, based on popular vote, right, didn't go for Andrew Jackson. So we have to revote. Well, top 3 get a vote, a revote. So who's got the least amount? Clay and Crawford, right? Well, those leave because those could be other candidates that. Okay, so it goes to the top 3 guys. So Crawford's got to be there. Henry Clay goes, you know what? I tell you what. I know I'd like to be president, but Crawford's better than I am. And Adams is better than I am. And I've got a lot of votes. And if I take my 13% and I take them and I add them to John Adams, and then those other 3% then vote for Adams, and if I can do this, what is this sounding like?
Corruption.
Well, it's kind of corruption. What happened in another election where they're like, hey, wait. I know, I got a solution. I'm going to back out, and I want my votes to go to...
That's not how it works.
It's kind of like what Hamilton did, didn't he? Tried to convince other people. They were like, yeah, don't vote for me. Vote for Adams. Okay, Electoral College, you're all in charge now. Even if you voted for those people, if you voted for Jackson, you have to say voting for Jackson. Everybody else, you have to choose one of the other 2 people, right? Don't vote for Jackson, vote for Adams. So how's Jackson feel about this? Well, everybody in the world wanted me. I'm the common man guy. I'm the winner. It doesn't. Clay backs out. So Jackson's like, but what about New Orleans? What about what I did with the Seminoles in Spain? Doesn't that matter? Everybody in the country, 40% of the people wanted me to be the president, and you're going to ignore them? And they're like, yep, pretty much. That's not going to make Jackson upset at all, so don't worry about it. Oh, wait. It says Jackson was furious. So maybe he was a little upset. Now, I thought that must be coming up. Okay, so Monroe's out. What do we get from Monroe? 2 treaties and a doctrine that says any European that comes over to America is going to be met with force, so don't even try it. Well, that was fun. I told you the Lex presidencies are like super fast. Okay, John Quincy Adams in like 5 minutes. Okay, he was like...
1824 was a watershed election in the United States. For the first time, a substantial number of commoners could vote for president.
The Constitution simply says that the states shall choose electors. It didn't say how the state shall choose electors. And in most states, until the 1820s, the electors were chosen by the state legislatures. But during 1810s and 1820s, increasingly, ordinary voters get to cast their ballots for president, technically for the electors, but in effect for president.
Jackson, the hero of New Orleans, appealed to voters across the nation and easily won the popular vote with a count of 153,000. John Quincy Adams, whose support came primarily from the Northeast, received 108,000 votes. Treasury Secretary William Crawford and House Speaker Henry Clay narrowly split another 90,000 votes. Jackson also received the most electoral votes, 99. But he needed a true majority, 131, to become president. As provided by the Constitution, members of the House of Representatives had to choose among the 3 front-runners, Jackson, Adams, and Crawford. The fourth place finisher, Henry Clay, having received 37 electoral votes, was in a powerful position to sway the election.
Clay was the hero of the West. He's from Kentucky until Jackson comes along. Jackson's from Tennessee. And Jackson is the greater hero, being the military hero. So Clay swings his support to John Quincy Adams, who carries the day, wins the presidency, becomes president, and turns around and names Henry Clay to be Secretary of State. Now, in our day and age, this might not seem like a big deal, but in those days, it was everything, because a succession of presidents before John Quincy Adams had gone from Secretary of State to president. So, in naming Henry Clay to be Secretary of State, John Quincy Adams essentially made him heir apparent to the presidency.
Jackson was furious. He publicly damned Clay for what he called a corrupt bargain.
He called him Judas of the West. Judas has received his 30 pieces of silver, and he will have the same ending.
Jackson and his supporters, they declared that the election had been stolen, the will of the people had been frustrated, and immediately in the spring of 1825, they began the campaign of 1828. We often think today that elections last a long time. Not at all. They don't have anything on the campaigns of the 18.
Like, oh, it must be genetic. Watch this. You'll laugh when I get to this. And think about John Adams, the first president, or the first John Adams, second president. Okay, so John Quincy Adams is like, hey, I want to build roads and canals. And they're like, yeah, that sounds really good. Hey, we've started this one called the Erie Canal, right? And we're going to bypass Niagara Falls, and so we can take ships from the Great Lakes out to the ocean without going over the falls, because nobody makes it. Right? So they're like, hey, why don't we just cut a river that goes from Lake Erie to the Hudson River, and then out the Hudson River? They're like, yeah, that's really great. We can just go through this little narrow bit of land in New York. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. Let's dig a big ditch. So they did. They dug a big ditch. And that happened in Adams when he was in office. He's like, yay, I got roads built and ditches dug. Cha-ching. Yeah, aren't I wonderful? Jacksonians, the people who were in support of Jackson, were like, we need to get this back because this John Quincy Adams guy doesn't know how to run a country. So he goes to, and this is what's really kind of funny, he goes and he develops the Democratic Party, not the Democratic Republican Party. But this is where I find this really ironic, is the Republican Party was started in Jackson, Michigan.
Wow. Why was the Republican Party started here, not?
It was started back just before Lincoln was a senator. So the Republican Party doesn't start until like 1840 something, 40, 50, somewhere in there. But it gets started in Jackson, Michigan, which is named after Andrew Jackson, who started his own party called the Democrats. It's kind of... See, if I never pointed that out, you guys would be like, whatever. Jackson, Michigan. It's just like right over there. You're like, oh, but that's the birthplace of the Republican Party, named after the guy who started the Democratic Party. See, the things you learn in school. Now you can go home tonight and have a conversation with your parents about it, and they'll be like, and that matters because... You're like, it's just cool. Maybe. Okay. So, John Quincy Adams. How many terms did John Adams serve? Did he run again? But he lost to Jefferson. Do you see where I'm going? Okay, so he runs again for his second term, and he loses to Jackson, where his dad lost to Jefferson. Okay, they're not even related. It would be really cool if, like, Jackson was related to Jefferson, and then they'd be like, oh, what a loser family the Adams are. They keep losing to the other family, right? But both Adams only got one term. Everybody else gets two. Is it genetic?
Probably. No.
I don't know. I don't know what it is, but it's just kind of creepy. It's kind of creepy. Okay. So, Jackson, 4 years later, he's like, I'm taking that White House. I've worked for 4 years to get in that White House. We are doing things. So, Adams versus Jackson, round 2. And we thought that Jefferson Adams was nasty. It was mudslinging with cow pies. Cow pies is like cow dung. Yeah, great. And it was like they were mudslinging from the pigsties. It wasn't mud, it was fecal matter. There was false, elaborated stories on both sides. Yeah, we totally see those nowadays, don't we? This is where it all started. The fabricated lie started here. Jackson comes out. He was like, I am here for you, the American people. I am just like you, and that's why I need to be president. And that Adams guy.
In 1828, John Quincy Adams ran for a second term. But once again, Andrew Jackson stood in his way. In this election, American political opinion was sharply split. Those for Adams, who believed he deserved 4 more years, and those for Jackson, who believed their man had been robbed in 1824, the victim of the corrupt bargain.
The one person who believed the charges absolutely, utterly, was Andrew Jackson himself, and he went home swearing eternal revenge, and he got it.
The election of 1828 was the dirtiest campaign in history. I don't think there's any question about that. It was brutal.
Jackson campaigned on his impressive war record. He was the hero of New Orleans, the conqueror of Florida, and a bona fide veteran of the American Revolution. But Jackson's past also included some unsavory behavior, which the Adams camp brazenly exposed.
They accused him of being a gambler, a military tyrant. John Quincy Adams called him a barbarian.
In this contentious election, character was the main issue.
The people on each side did everything they could to smear the character of the other man.
And in the case of Andrew Jackson, they are really beyond the pale. They attack Jackson, and they attack his wife, Rachel. And the attacks on Rachel Jackson are really merciless.
The dirt on Rachel was that she had married Jackson in 1791 before obtaining a legal divorce from a previous marriage. The charge was true, but so old that no one expected it to be an issue. But then, in the heat of the campaign, a Cincinnati newspaper published the damning story.
When that Cincinnati editor exposed the details of the fact that Rachel had lived in bigamy and that Andrew had lived in sin, you know that it tore his soul. He blamed Henry Clay for that. Henry Clay was a close friend of the editor, and while Clay denied it, Jackson never believed the denial. So he despised Clay for the corrupt bargain, but came to despise him even more because of that attack on his wife.
The Jackson people responded with equally outrageous charges against Adams.
They would reply that he lived with his wife before they were married. He provided a young American virgin for the pleasure of a Russian czar. He bought a pool table for gambling devices, broke the Sabbath.
Important issues concerning government were ignored. Instead, campaign rhetoric focused on the personal lives and character flaws of the candidates.
What kind of a human being do you want to be in the White House? Do you want somebody whose wife is a whore, which is essentially what they accused Mrs. Jackson of being? Or do you want somebody who pimped for the Tsar of Russia, which is what they said that Adams had done?
I have to say this. The things that the Adams people said about Jackson were mainly true. The things that the Jackson people said about Adams were lies.
In this election, the truth hardly mattered. Jackson's popularity with the common man proved to be overwhelming, and he won in a landslide. But the joy of victory didn't last. In December 1828, after buying her inaugural gown, Rachel Jackson died, suddenly, of a heart attack. She was 61 years old. This was a cruel blow to Jackson, and it would shape his presidency.
Andrew Jackson is reputed to have remarked on the occasion of her death that he did, in fact, forgive all those who had attacked him personally, but that he would never, never forgive those who had attacked his wife.
In 1828, John Quincy Adams ran for a second term. But once again, Andrew Jackson stood in his way.